right. I'd like to welcome everybody to another episode on Roots to Health. I'm Dr. Craig Keever, and here to talk about our plant-based journey and all things centered around kind of lifestyle choices. Yeah, we're creating this podcast, I think, primarily as hopefully as a resource for people, and just to kind of document the journey that we've had, and passing along helpful things that we probably wish we would have known at a different time.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know when my kids were growing up and myself how preventative care makes such a big difference in being able to avoid so many things that we're just kind of, everybody's just told, oh, that's just normal aging. That's just normal things.
Precisely. Yeah. In talking about adding to the whys of why we're doing this, the health benefits really was the whole reason I got into this. When I turned 50 years old 12 years ago, I told my story, I think, in the first episode of our podcast, but, I was pushing 300 pounds and 5 medicines and several metabolic disorders, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, sleep apnea. And it just wasn't getting any better. And none of the medicines I was taking was actually making things better. I've heard an analogy not too long ago about throwing a medicine at problems like this. For instance, high cholesterol. It's like knowing that your house has termites, and all of a sudden you have a hole in the wall related to the termites. And so what do you decide to do? Well, you get a picture and hang it up over the hole and say, "Isn't it great? My hole is gone."
And right? We're taught that if we're taking the medicine, we're good.
Yeah.
We've seen people that have taken medicine all their life and they have an early,
exactly.
It's not so good.
Taking a medicine like that may give you proper numbers for cholesterol, but it's not doing anything to kill the termites.
Yeah.
The problems are still happening. And I really loved that analogy. It was I think it was a physician with his own YouTube channel that I saw that on. It was a great analogy. So, in terms of what we're doing here today, this episode is going to be kind of about how to get started, and so what I want to start with discussing is, it's very important if you're trying to figure out how to get started to understand your why.
Right.
Your why is going to be the biggest thing that keeps you on track.
Because the biggest thing about this is the mindset. It really isn't about food at that point.
Exactly. It's a huge mindset change. Prior to going plant-based and prior to being as health conscious as I am, eating the standard American diet, I guess I was kind of like an ostrich with his head in the sand. I didn't want to know. There was a part of me that knew what I'm eating is not healthy and not particularly good for me. I tried often to make the healthier choices, but I didn't have much of a background to really figure out what those healthier choices were and what that actually looked like.
Yeah, the biggest problem, I think, is what is the healthiest choice? What does health mean? Because we've got so much information in the world now and that's what I love about the plant-based side. Is all science-based, and you can trust, the information that you're getting from it.
Very much, very much. And in reference to figuring out your why, again, which is like the first question I would encourage anybody thinking about this way of life to answer, because you just got to know those answers. So for me, it was completely about my health. That's the only thing that I was worried about. I knew when I turned 50 and I was obese and all those health problems that I was a heart attack waiting to happen. And that very quickly, when the light bulb turned on, that was my why.
And you knew it was only going to get worse.
And I knew it was only going to get worse. That's exactly right. And I also had some kind of gut feeling, pun intended, that it really was a lifestyle issue.
Yeah.
And it was empowering to know and learn that I had ultimate control over an awful lot of what was going on in my body.
Absolutely.
That's incredibly empowering.
Yeah. My mom always said, whether you have physicians in your life or not, you have to be your own advocate. You know, you have to advocate for your own health, because no one can really sit down and know everything about what your lifestyle. I mean, it's really not talked about a lot in most
Right.
typical medical practices.
That's very
What's
true.
your lifestyle?
So, having said that, and as a pediatrician, you might realize, as I'm talking to my kids and their checkups as they're getting older, about lifestyle choices, what do we eat? I talk to them a lot about, let's eat your fruits and vegetables. I always joke with them, I always tell my older kids, particularly as they get up to around 5 and older than that, I say, I got 5 words I always want you to remember, just 5. All year long till your next checkup, 5 words. Eat your fruits and vegetables. And they look at me like with their eyes lighting up when I say fruits, and then when I say vegetables, it's like, So anyway, so that's the biggest why for me. Now, having said that, for these kids, and most of whom don't have metabolic disease, although that's sadly changing as well.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot more obese children as obesity is becoming a more accepted condition.
And cholesterol getting
and
up there.
cholesterol and all that.
That's
But
crazy.
there's 2 other reasons to choose this way of eating and this lifestyle that are not talked about greatly, but I think it is apropos to talk about right now, because we're talking about finding our why. And if you don't have particular urgent needs on the healthcare front,
Right.
there are 2 other whys that are very valid. And the first of those is animal ethics.
Yeah.
And when I don't talk about that often in my clinic, but when I do bring that topic up, my favorite thing to say is, one look at a chicken truck on these highways of Northwest Arkansas, which we see quite a bit, and that'll give you your answer.
And that, like, I didn't necessarily have the blood work that you had, but the thing that really helped me stay put on this was the animal ethics. It really was a game changer.
Exactly. And the biggest issue with animal ethics, of course, is related to these CAFOs, concentrating animal feeding organizations that are operations that, cram so many animals into a small amount of space. And the conditions of the animals are terrible. They're pumping them full of antibiotics and chemicals and hormones to maximize production. And, they're growing these chickens that can't walk because they're so big they break their legs. And, it's a hideous industry.
Something to take a look at. It really is.
It can be a big motivator. There are many people that choose to eat a plant-based lifestyle strictly because of animal ethics.
Right.
And so it's a very real thing, and there's a lot of very good documentaries about that out there. And then the third thing that could be a why, and again, like you, as I've gone down this journey, well, I'm kind of fond of saying, if you would have mentioned any of these issues 5 to 10 years ago to me, I would have just said, it didn't make any difference to me. But animal ethics is a big deal. And the other issue is environmental issues. And what that
affects all of us.
That affects all of us. And I'll say I was really astounded 2 years ago when I took my plant-based nutrition course through Cornell University. It's still a fact that just floors me. 50% of all the waterways in this country, and this is a verified researched fact, 50% of all the waterways, to include streams, ponds, reservoirs, lakes, name it, 50% of all the waterways in this country do not support aquatic life. And why is that? Well, maybe not completely, but in large part related to some of these large animal feeding operations, dairy operations, all kinds of things. Well, you get runoff from all these operations that get into your water table. What happens then? It creates an algae bloom. We've all seen them,
Yeah.
Then what happens? Well, the algae dies and sinks to the bottom, and then the bacteria take over. And then the next step, and the key step, is when the bacteria take over, they eat up all the oxygen in the water. No oxygen in the water, no aquatic life.
And the oceans really are struggling.
And the oceans are struggling, and this is totally evidenced. There's actually a dead zone at the mouth of the Mississippi River that's growing regularly every year, in large part due to all the runoff that's happening from all these big farm organizations. And then you throw on top of that, the other thing that helps with the algae blooms too is you get the feed that's needed to feed all these animals, and the fertilizer from that also runs off. And so anyway, those can be
the land, the trees that are cut down just to be able
exactly
to provide space for all those.
Exactly. So those are the three main whys. Like I said, for me, when I first got into this, the last two that I just discussed really didn't make a difference to me. But as I've gotten into this and looked at the reality of what's going on, I started to wake up to the cognitive dissonance that is out there in today's society. And I was fully part of it. And probably still am on some days today, it just doesn't register, but, I'm trying to make a difference, as small as my difference makes.
One of my favorite pastors says you have to kind of cross-pollinate. You have to get out of your own area. And once you get close enough to it, it will impact you. I mean, I can't watch the graphic things, but the sanctuaries where you see these are living, sentient beings that want to be okay.
All right. So step one is just to kind of rehash a little bit because we've done several podcast episodes now, and I think I've talked a little bit about these issues, but just to reaffirm, what is plant-based eating? Okay, what are we talking about here? And that's basically a diet that focuses primarily on fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. Now, true enough, I also talk a lot in my well child checks at the office. The fact that while I choose to eat this way with no meat, no dairy, no processed food, no sugar, no oil, okay, being plant-based doesn't necessarily require all of that. I have to do that because of my health issues. All right. I'm also fond of saying that I'm nobody's food police, right? And I do think that this lifestyle that I'm living with complete reliance on plant-based diet is the healthiest way, and I have evidence, that's behind that. But there's probably, and it's well recognized, 80 to 90% of the world will never go completely plant-based. Right. That doesn't mean you can't be partially plant-based, okay? And to that end, the Mediterranean diet is a very good alternative for those that can't go completely plant-based for whatever reason.
To the degree we've Americanized it a little bit.
Well, and I'm going to get to that.
I'm probably getting ahead.
No, that's absolutely right. Because I mentioned that, the Americanized version of the Mediterranean diet is probably not the greatest idea, because our idea here in this country is, okay, what is a Mediterranean diet? An emphasis on fresh fruits and vegetables with a little bit of meat and oil. But in America, then we douse everything with olive oil.
And you've kind of defeated the purpose.
And then you defeat the purpose, yeah. So too much oil is, and we've talked about this in our one of our other episodes about fats. It's just a processed food that's inflammatory and generally not very good for us.
And part of the problem is Americans really don't like to be limited on much, right. But there is something that you really just have to kind of monitor because sometimes we're not honest about what we're really taking in, like, I eat vegetables, but It's like if it's doused in butter and a lot of different things, then okay,
Exactly. So
maybe measure.
yeah. So just the point with all of that to me is just stating that, an emphasis on plants is always going to be better for us. But unless you have metabolic problems like I do, to be 100% strict about it and compliant with it may not be necessary. It's all about the proper ratios of macronutrients and how they're used.
And I always say, everybody goes about this differently, but if you don't go 100%, just don't blame the diet. Don't blame that way of eating.
Exactly.
Because you're not going to get if you're trying to get cholesterol down and things, and you're just kind of dipping your toe in it, that's okay, but that you can't blame.
That is completely correct. Yeah. So it is a bit more of a challenge. I think it's how should I say this? It's a slower process to allow your body to heal using a plant-based diet than it is, as Americans, we're used to a pill for every ill, and you take the pill and it's gone.
Right.
Well, it's not really gone. That's our perception. Okay. But to actually heal the body through nutrition does take more time. Some people can get very quick results in some areas. My blood sugar has been a bit stubborn at times, and whether that's due to I didn't get compliant enough with the degree of fat in my diet, I don't know yet. But I have a suspicion that, there's sometimes fats that encroach in my diet that I don't realize. And so,
that's the hardest thing is I don't think people are really monitoring or want to long-term monitor what they're actually taking in.
Exactly.
So if you don't know, you can't really assess if you're not.
That's right.
You're not monitoring it.
So the next phase of this discussion today, just to briefly touch on, what are the benefits of plant-based eating? And we've kind of hinted at a few of them here already today, the health benefits, as those of you that have heard my story, and I mentioned earlier, based on turning plant-based, I've lost nearly 100 pounds. I no longer need to take 5 of any medicines. The only things I take are supplements right now.
After having taken cholesterol medicine in your 30s.
That's right.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so chronic disease is treated using a plant-based diet if it's done long-term and done in a compliant fashion. Other things, improved digestion. That's just a byproduct of getting enough and the right kinds of fiber. That's such a huge deal, and I don't think we've done an episode for the podcast yet on fiber, but I've released a short. I think that's either on my website or soon to be on my pediatric website about fiber. Just a hugely important topic that, I never used to think about, didn't realize, it didn't even dawn on me to ask, does meat have fiber?
Right. And that's another thing that people don't understand. They have interviewed people on the street and they'll say, what has fiber in it? Oh, meat.
Yeah.
So it's like, we kind of need to know where it is.
Yeah. Meat has no fiber.
Yeah.
Period. The end. While it does have
dairy as well. Is that right? Or
that's correct too. Okay. Dairy, animal-based products don't have fiber, and so,
and really, it's not saying that we're not saying that protein's not important.
Right.
But of the two, if you're going to worry about how high your protein is versus if you're getting any fiber really is the more of the priority, right?
Right. Very much so. Well, and the issue here is really for our bodies to function properly, digestion-wise, and a whole lot of other reasons-wise, we need a minimum of 30 grams of fiber a day.
It's a huge thing for mental health.
Huge. It affects brain function, immune function, just our whole body, hormone function. So, the amount of fiber that we get and the kinds of fiber we get are very important. And while it is important to get the proper amounts of protein, as I mentioned in the podcast on protein, it's really easy to get the right amount of protein.
For sure.
It just has to be monitored a little bit, and not even over monitored. It's just, You eat enough beans and tofu and
it's protein without, people will say, oh, this is hormone-free meat. It's never hormone-free
yeah.
because it's another animal. It's got antibiotics in it and all this other
That's right.
Bad stuff in the protein.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. All right. And then other benefits of plant-based eating that we've kind of touched on, the environment. I don't remember the specific numbers, but in order to raise a cow takes, I don't know how many thousands of gallons of water. And to get a similar amount of food from plants, probably, if I remember correctly, was like a tenth of that.
Oh, gosh, yes. Yeah, for sure.
So that's just our water resource that, having so many cows, it will tap us out eventually, in terms of resources. All right. So how to get started? We've spent 20 minutes on talking about the whys. How to get started? Well, I will say, for me,
I think if the why is there, you're downhill from there.
The why is really important.
It's huge.
So how did I get started? Well, the first time that it ever occurred to me that I might want to be plant-based was after I saw a documentary called Forks Over Knives. And I was a single guy at the time. And I tried it as best as I could. I didn't have any particular resources that I dove into. I didn't think about looking on YouTube. I didn't really do YouTube much at that point. And so I didn't have a community. I didn't have friends that were plant-based. And so I just did the limited that I could. And I was relatively successful for about a month, maybe two. It wasn't a particular.
You're a creature of habit. You could eat the same meal.
I can.
Every week. I need variety.
But the problem was I didn't have community was the biggest problem. And I didn't have anybody to talk with about other ways to approach this. And so I only lasted about a month or two. And I did notice, as I vaguely recall, some labs that I had done during that time that did improve. But with none of my friends doing this and, being the social creature that I can be sometimes, then, it was just
it's a big deal.
It was unsustainable,
Yeah.
And so I've talked about this with a number of people and, there's no one way to get started. That's a correct way.
Right.
You
have to do it for your personality.
Yeah. You've got to figure out, once you figured out your why, then you now, one of the things that I did do initially that I did maintain in terms of making a lifestyle change, because I absolutely abhor the words, I'm going on a diet.
Right.
That just implies I'm going to eat one way for a while, get to my goals, and then I'll go back. And that's why we yo-yo. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not yo-yoing.
Yeah.
It's a lifestyle change. Yeah. It's not going on a diet. So once I made that commitment, that changed everything. And the one commitment that I made early on, I stopped drinking soda.
Right.
Okay. And I like to tell my kids there are zero nutritional benefits to drinking soda. It's all chemicals and water and sugar. And if you're drinking diet, it's all chemicals and none of it's good for you. So I was able to and have been able to maintain that. And so for some people, getting started may include, baby steps like that. Taking one thing, because I knew about myself, if I were to be eating the standard American diet one day and try to make an about face and eat a completely different healthy lifestyle, quote unquote healthy lifestyle, and that would last maybe 3 or 4 days, and I'd get tired of it and overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so part of the thing that I did was take those baby steps and make lifestyle changes that were consistent. And eventually I did have to dive in. But to your point that you mentioned earlier, I could not expect the changes that I really wanted to see to be happening until I was able to be fully compliant. Okay. But having said that, I did notice when I stopped drinking soda, some things got a little better. I did lose a little bit of weight,
It's been my experience, and this is just my experience, but it feels like people that dive in and commit to it do actually end up doing better, because they kind of, again, the mindset, they kind of like get their house rid of all the junk. Yep. They get all the stuff. It's not an option. And so it's really hard with the food addictions we have to dip our toe in it.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I mean, I love cheese like nobody's business. And if you gave me an ounce of it, it's going to be a problem, you know? So it's like, I feel like that really
Yeah.
does seem to go well.
Yeah. Well, and another alternative to this, is maybe picking one day a week and say, on this day, this is all plant-based.
For sure. And that's a great way if you're not sure if you want to do this or not. Just
give it a try.
Just give it a try.
Yeah. And then you
Don't
can kind
tell
of get a
yourself
sense.
there's all these no's, just like,
That's
okay,
right.
this is a choice I'm making.
Well, that's right. And to that end, I do think that it's kind of a big deal. At first for me, it really was on one level about everything that I can't eat.
And that's hard
anymore.
going in like that.
Right.
Really,
And
it
so-
was for me too.
Yeah. And so you'll notice, and I can rip this off pretty quick. Okay. I eat no meat, no dairy, no processed food, no sugar, no oil. Okay?
What?
Yeah. Now, that's just about everything I used to eat.
Yeah.
Right. What happened as I changed was my eyes started to open and I realized how many more new foods I was getting.
For sure.
Okay. And so then instead of the game of what I can't eat, it started to become, a recognition of what I can and
For
am
sure.
eating.
And what you're gaining in your life by losing that.
Oh my goodness.
To be able to know, I mean, I had a lot of concern about I had all those fibromyalgia symptoms and really weird symptoms at night, not sleeping, to kind of rest my mind and it does actually, inflammation happens in the brain too. And so when you have inflammation all over your body, you're going to have more anxiety in general because of it.
Very much so. So, and in terms of getting started then, like we've, I think, alluded to a little bit here, one of the really fun things about, especially at first, is experimenting with new recipes.
We just had our brownie on the way over here.
Yeah.
It's like so
And a
good.
completely plant-based brownie that's compliant with everything for me. There's no sugar
in it.
added.
Mhm.
And so all kinds of different things. And Amy has so graciously, since we've started this journey, made it her mission in life to create all of our favorite comfort foods from the standard American diet into plant-based compliant foods. Boy, has she done an amazing job of that. Because I will tell you right here and now, if I was not enjoying what I was eating, 4.5 years later into this, I would not be doing it.
Yeah.
I love the way we eat.
Yeah.
And it's very tasty, very satisfying, and very fulfilling. Very
These are
much
those
so.
spices. People think that it's going to be bland, and it's like, and when you read off all that we can eat, it's like, okay, that seems, you don't think about the flavors that you can add to that. So spices are a huge part of that.
Yeah.
To be able to cut down your salt intake as well, if you can spice something up.
Oh, yeah.
Miso is a good salty flavoring, but it does not affect your blood pressure
Sodium.
at all.
And
Yeah.
blood sodium.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. So another thing in terms of getting started, she alluded to, stocking your pantry kind of thing, I think a few minutes ago. I found for me, it was really important to get rid of the garbage. Once I really did commit to this.
It's hard if it's there.
I tell you, if it's in even today,
Yeah.
very often,
Yeah.
not always, I'm better about it, but if it's in my house,
And
I'm
it's not
probably
that we
gonna
have
eat it.
animal products in our house, but you are like referencing like maybe some bread that's maybe not top of the list.
bread
or-
that's not so compliant or sweets of some sort. Those are my weaknesses, so fortunately there is an Ezekiel bread that is compliant and works very well for me. And I even now like the taste, it may take a little getting used to, but some people don't and may never, but I actually like it.
He means me. I'm not as crazy about it, but
The other thing that we did, because this is a big change in lifestyle and a big change in, like you mentioned earlier, a thought process, a mindset. We don't go out to eat nearly like we used to. And that's kind of a big social gap.
it's a big thing.
Okay. So one of the things that we've done from time to time is, we add new things to our kitchen, new toys to play with,
Yeah.
because we're
Dishes
not
and
spending
things.
all that money on going out to eat anymore.
Yeah.
We've got a little more money we can put into having some new tools in our kitchen.
Free
So
platters.
yeah, keeping things stocked in that way from the tools that allow us to do more fun things with our food. And so the time that we historically spent eating out, maybe sometimes spent now doing things in the kitchen.
Yeah, and it's like depends on who you are. Like Dr. McDougall was all no nonsense, but I like to even put like little, parchment paper down and make it look like it would be plated even. So it's like, if you miss it, then make it special at home. So
Absolutely. And then, the other thing that's, I think, really important to recognize in this is that because we don't go out to eat so much, food prep is a big deal.
yeah,
It does take more time.
it does.
And to that end, one thing that can really help is batch cooking, so, if you're going to make one meal, it's almost just as easy to make 5. And then you've got those in your fridge
Right.
to just put in the microwave and bam.
I think especially in the beginning, it doesn't, if you don't like the idea of that, that's fine. But I do think it's really, it's like if it's there, you'll eat it. And if something else, then you're going to go get takeout if not. And so it really does. It's all that preparation, meets opportunity kind of thing.
Yeah. So bottom line is, in terms of getting started, I think, especially if you're very new to this process, I think a couple of buzzwords. Patience is the number one. I mean, and be gracious to yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, even 4.5 years into this, I'm not 100% compliant. I've been compliant enough to lose some weight and gain some health back. There are still issues I'm working on. So patience, although the flip side of that coin is you don't want to give yourself so much grace.
That grace can go both ways.
Yeah, you don't want to give yourself so much grace that you never get started.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a balance to be had with that. But
make promises to yourself, because the best thing, it's the hardest thing when you break a promise to yourself. So if you've set a goal, just do your best to try to stay with it.
Yeah.
It'll feel good.
And but some amount of flexibility
Absolutely.
is really important in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is hard. This is
It
one of the
is.
hardest things. I mean, I don't want to make people feel like, oh, I can't do it, but it's hard, in the beginning.
Well, and especially in this culture. I
You
think
have to be a maverick. That's right.
Yeah, the reason that it's difficult is because of the culture we live in.
For sure.
Where junk food is so readily available, and the convenience factor is a big deal. And that's why batch cooking can be a really helpful thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So at this point, resources and any other final tips, I think, we have a resource page on ozarkpediatrics.org. When you log into that website, one of the tabs at the top of the page says plant-based resources. That'll give you links to multiple documentaries, YouTube videos, websites, books, and cookbooks. We enjoy sharing those. That's a free service for anybody that wants to log into my website.
Yeah. Well, and they don't have to log in. They don't have to give any kind of email information.
Right.
So they can come and go as they want to, as far as that's concerned.
So that's one quick place to start as just kind of a general resource page. And, there's all kinds of good books out there from our plant-based network that there is in this country.
And our Facebook page is on there, our Keever's Plant-Based Tribe. And so that's a community in itself where everybody kind of comes together. And because, in the beginning, you're like, oh, I tried so many recipes, like with ranch dressing and stuff that I just didn't like. So if you can kind of cut that down for someone and say, I love this one. This one's great. Yeah. If you don't like it, don't think that means there's not a good one out there for you. Just got to find what's good for you.
You bet. Yeah. So don't forget that one, the Keever's Plant-Based Tribe, where we administrate that just because we don't want trolls on our Facebook page. Right. So, as long as you're
most of the plant-based pages most of the plant-based pages we liked, but they're pretty rigid for beginners.
Yeah.
So we wanted a more flexible page where everybody could kind of feel comfortable,
Yeah. And so that Facebook page is really about asking questions and being in a place that you're you're
Share
not
your
going to get
recipes.
attacked.
Right.
Some of those straight vegan pages are, like she said, pretty rigid and
My first post on our page is, we don't do that here.
yeah, exactly. All right. So I think we pretty well summarized. I think getting started is a mindset change, and you can approach that in different ways, from taking baby steps to just jumping right in. I do think it's easier to jump in if you've got a community.
Community's huge on this.
It is. It's a really big deal. And to that end, one of the beautiful things that we've got going on in this area, my favorite lifestyle medicine doctor, her name is Dr. Cynthia Morgan.
Yes.
She has a monthly plant-based evening where potluck, where people bring their special recipes. They're all compliant, and we have a nice social evening to that effect. We have tried that and just found the pace of our lives at the moment. That is difficult for us to be maintaining right now, but we may still have more of those in the future.
We need to try to put that on our website so that if anybody's interested in that, they can contact Dr. Morgan and get on her email address there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right.
I'll have that on there by the time this is released.
Very good. Well, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in, and hopefully this provided a few points for getting started on your own plant-based journey, however that's going to look for you.
There you go.
Thank you.